Hi, this is Mr. Oziak. In this video I wanted to review the concepts of the coordinate system and the distance as well as midpoint formulas. So let's get right into it. Coordinate system is a simple way that we use in order to describe points on a plane. So this image here represents what a coordinate system would look like. The white space is a plane, geometrical shape, and the grid lines represent the coordinate system. In the coordinate system that we normally use, we generally tend to use horizontal axis as the x-axis, or we call it the x-axis, and we're going to follow the same convention. So the horizontal axis is the x-axis, and the vertical axis is called normally the y-axis. And a plane consists of an infinite number of points, and one of those points, for instance, is located over here. And using the coordinate system, I can find the address of that point. So to find the address of that point, I just need to find out what number on horizontal axis and on the vertical axis describes that point. So to find the number on the horizontal axis, all I need to do is drop a line from that point that's perpendicular to the horizontal axis and read out the number on that axis that corresponds to that place. So on my axis, the number that corresponds to the plane where that line drops onto is equal to 2. And I'm going to do the same thing with my vertical axis. So I have to draw a line from my point that's perpendicular to the vertical axis. And I need to read out the number where my drawn line touches the vertical axis. And then I just need to write those 2 points, those 2 numbers down. And by convention, the number that corresponds to the horizontal axis, the x number, is written first. So in this case, that number is equal to 2. And the number that corresponds to vertical axis, the y number, is written second, and that's also 2. So the coordinates of that point, let's call this point P, those coordinates are 2 and 2. So taking a look at this point over here, coordinates of this point is -2 on the horizontal axis and 0 on the vertical axis. So that's -2, 0. For this point over here, coordinates are -2 from the horizontal axis and 4 on the vertical axis. For this point here, -2 on the x-axis and -2 on the y-axis. For this point over here, would be halfway between 0 and 2 on the horizontal axis. So that point is the number corresponding to that point is equal to 1. And the same thing over here, that would be -1. So the coordinates of this point are +1, -1. +1 on the x-axis, -1 on the y-axis. And maybe one more. Let's take a look at this point over here. So this point on the x-axis, it's 6, and on the y-axis, it's 4. And following the same approach, we can find out the address, the coordinates of every point on the coordinate system, and the coordinate plane, rather. Okay, so now I have an example of 2 points of the coordinate plane. I call those points A and B, and by convention we use capital letters to name 2 points. So those points are located in coordinates 1, 1 and 4 and 4. And the question I might want to ask myself is, what is the distance between points A and point B? And there is a simple way that I could use in order to find out that distance. So first thing I realize is that I can draw a right angle triangle, and in that right angle triangle, the segment AB is the hypotenuse. And because this triangle is a right angle triangle, the Pythagoras' theorem will be true for this, and I can write that r squared will be equal to, let's call this side A and let's call this side B. R squared will be a squared plus b squared. So then r will be equal to square root, take a square root of both sides, a squared plus b squared. So to find the length of segment AB, or the length of r, all I need to do is just find distance between A and C, the horizontal distance between the 2 points, and find the distance between B and C, which is the vertical distance between the 2 points. And then use those 2 distances in my distance formula. So how would I find the horizontal and the vertical distances? So looking at the horizontal distance, what I recognize here is that point A has coordinates of x and y, so its x coordinate is equal to x1, and that is that number on the x-axis over here. And point B has the x coordinate equal to x2, and that is that number denoted or marked on the x-axis. And it's easy to see that the distance between the points x2 and x1 is simply the difference in the coordinates of those 2 points. And in a very similar way, the vertical coordinate of point B is equal to y2, the vertical coordinate of point A is equal to y1, and the vertical distance, the distance between those 2 points, is simply y2 minus y1. So then, following the approach from the previous slide, I realized that in order to find distance between A and B, so distance between those 2 points, all I need to do is just take the vertical distance and the horizontal distance, square them, and then take a square root. So that tells me that distance between AB is equal to square root of x squared minus x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, where x2 and x1 are the x coordinates of the 2 points, and y2 and y1 are the y coordinates of the 2 points. So looking at this example, point A has coordinates of 1 and 1, and point B has coordinates of 4 and 4. And normally what I usually write, over the coordinates, I write that this is x2, that this is y2, and that this is x1, and that this is y1. And I use my formula, which is root of x2 minus x1, all that squared, plus y2 minus y1, all that squared as well. So if I put the numbers in, I'm going to get this formula, and the result is equal to square root of 18. And we can leave it like that. So that would be the way to calculate distance between the 2 points. So then we can take a look at the midpoint formula. Midpoint formula allows us to find the answer to a question: what are the coordinates of point that is halfway between any 2 given points? So here we have 2 points, A and B. A has coordinates of x2 and y2, and B has coordinates of x1 and y1. And we're looking for the coordinates of point C. And a very simple way to find the coordinates of point C is to add the horizontal coordinates, the x coordinates of both points, and divide them by 2. And then add the vertical coordinates, the y coordinates of both points, and divide them by 2. So if we do that for our example, point B has coordinates of 2 and 2, and point A has coordinates of 6 and 5. So to find the coordinates of the midpoint, point C, I'm going to add 2 plus 6 over 2 and 2 plus 5 over 2, which gives me the coordinates of 4 and 3.5. So you can see that point C is the coordinates of point C, the x coordinate of point C is 4 from our coordinate system, and you can see that the y coordinate of point C lies halfway between 3 and 4, and that's also what we calculated. So to recap, we spoke about the coordinate system, we figured out how to find the distance between the 2 points, and we figured out how to find the coordinates of a midpoint between the 2 points. And we're going to continue with our exploration of the coordinate system in the next videos in this series. So thank you for watching, and this is Mr. Oziak out.